Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada.
Hi.
What's up? How are you?
Nothing. Good. How are you?
I was with G last week and we were talking about you a bit. Obviously, always saying good. Yeah.
The siblings. That's what I call you two. The troublemakers. The two of you together. Hi, Derek, too. Nice
How you
to meet
doing,
you.
Michelle?
Really nice to meet you.
Michelle, I forget where you're located.
I'm right now right in Fort Lee, New Jersey. However, we'll be back in Manhattan very soon. Manhattan person, but in Fort Lee, New Jersey right now because I had mold in the city, unfortunately.
When do you think you're gonna be back in?
In where? What do you mean? In Manhattan? I hope when this lease ends, I'm hoping like within the year, hopefully. But great. I do really like my apartment. And I know you're also, Don, like you like having space. You like not being in the city too, in some ways. It's a thing.
You know, it was, I was in the city for 20 years. I lived in there for about 15 and it was great. But now it's just different. Like you want to go to town, you go to town. I want to be in the city. It's an hour. It's like,
Exactly.
And I just got invited by Max Lugavere to come in for a screening on Saturday night. And
I'm going Friday, by the way. Damn, you should go Friday. Yeah, I'm going Friday. It's in like 57th Street.
Yeah. Hold on. He said ticket Saturday. I got to see if I can make it Friday.
He's going both, so you can also go Saturday. But I'll be there Saturday, so I'll be happy to see you. I'll be there Friday if you go.
What's this event? He didn't really. He said it was a documentary.
It's his documentary he made about like doing the brain research based on his mom's like health and like her decline and ultimately her passing. So I just like it was more. It's like a personal reason I want to be there too.
Yeah. I want to show him. I mean, Max has been very, very awesome to me.
Amazing.
And, he had me on the podcast, so I'd like to show support. So I don't know if I can make it Friday though, because I have a trip I got to take during the day and get back and go. I don't know, but
that's nice. And you'll be back in the city then Saturday. Welcome back to both of us.
Derek, you love the city though, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, in small doses. Yeah, I go there, I get amped up, then I come back to the West Coast, and I'm like, okay, that was good.
Where are you on the West Coast, Eric?
Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so like you're in the most beautiful nature. Like, yeah, you have a good balance then.
Yeah, I like the contrast.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I met Derek years ago. Derek's a running mechanics coach, but was working with a celebrity in New York, and he was like, "Can I bring the guy in?" And I didn't know him. He asked my head coach, and I was like, "Sure." And then he started like instructing my coaches, and then we started hanging out, and we became friends. He spent like 6 weeks in the city, and the next thing you know, I'm like, I was going to start a podcast with my buddy Sean Perrine.
Was it years ago? Because you have 160 episodes. Like,
yeah,
I just saw that. I was like,
we have a lot. So I was going to start a podcast with Sean Perrine. Sean Perrine was the ex-editor-in-chief of Muscle Fitness, but Sean, like, unfortunately passed away. He ended up having lung cancer. He fucking never smoked a day in his life, never drank.
Was a runner, using his oxygen properly, like the last person you ever expected. Wow.
I mean, it's just like terrible. It was just, I honestly think that he was under so much stress at work. I think work killed him. That's off the record, but actually it's on the record because we're recording. We don't do any fancy. We don't do any fancy intros. This is Derek and I. This was always just about a conversation. This was more about us bringing on like interesting people. Doesn't always have to be about fitness, wellness, nutrition. It doesn't. It could just be about like we brought on like DEA, right? We brought on Navy SEALs. It's just like talking about life and things. So like so you are a holistic RD, right? So can you explain that a little bit? Like what is that?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So I'm like what you could call me holistic, functional, integrative, basically, whereby there's like conventional dietetics, which is really much more what you would think of as like what dietitians do in hospitals. Functional dietitians look at the whole body. So we want to see how this organ's interacting with this organ, how different parts of your lifestyle and your health are all incorporated into the whole of your health. And then also really incorporating a lot of those maybe nutritional supplements or testing and other things that are looking at the body in a little bit of a different way.
Okay. So when did you get into this?
So I've been a dietitian for 10 years, but I've been a functional dietitian for like 9, even though I wanted to study it. It's like the dietetics degree is like a 6-year, 7-year degree. And then if you want to specialize after, you can. So I've been interested in nutrition forever, all 32 years on this planet. And then I lost 100 pounds right before college. Yeah, that's a huge part of the equation of why I became a dietitian in the first place. Yeah, rapidly lost 100 pounds before college in a way I would never recommend to anyone else. Went into college and then was like, oh, I'm grossly undereating and not moving in the right way. And it really made me even more interested in the degree in a different way.
Derek?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions around. I was reading an article, and they were looking through the research and saying there's an increase in things like colon cancer, especially among young people. And so that freaked me out. And so, they're identifying different potential causes, but I would assume that a lot of it has to do with what they're eating, what's going in their system.
100%. Yeah. I think when I think of colon cancer specifically and any cancer, we know there's so many different factors. Of course, food, of course, genetics, of course, environment. I think of when it comes to cancer and the increase of cancers, I think of all of us as having been in kind of like an experiment for the past like 100 years since the advent of processed foods and the advent of adding toxins to everything. And we're seeing the results of that experiment. And unfortunately, it's that we're all getting sicker, it seems like, by the day, even doing the same lifestyle things or even more than we were doing before, which is devastating, by the way. But we're all so hopeful about health. But it's, it's really scary to see the numbers of these diseases skyrocket like this.
Yeah, it's freaky. I mean, so back up for a second, because losing
Yeah.
100 pounds is not like you passed it very casually. And I don't know if I
I'll come
knew
back.
that about you. I got to be honest with you. Like, I don't know if I know we have talked, but I didn't know that you had that in your background.
Yeah.
What are some of the things now that you find come really easy for you that may have not, before college, right? That you're thinking about and saying, wow, like if I just did this, like my trajectory would have been completely different.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, first of all, one thing about weight loss that a lot of us don't acknowledge, but I know you both acknowledge, is that there's a lot of social implications of living in a larger body. There's a lot of social implications. So for myself, that's why I lost weight in the first place, because I had always been bigger growing up. I was going from Queens, New York, where I grew up, going to the University of Delaware. And I was like, oh, wow, people aren't going to like know me there. I mean, they're going to have to know me from what they see, not from my soul. I had no social problems. I had a huge, beautiful life when I was going away to school. And I'm like, I'm going to have to lose weight for that. So I really rapidly lost weight. I think growing up, the reason I was in a larger body was because my family didn't cook, and no blame to them. They just didn't. It just wasn't in our purview. It wasn't their skill set. I think if it would have been from childhood, eating became more of like a family activity, and it became something that we weren't just grabbing pizza or fast food and things like that, it would have been a lot easier to not go on that trajectory. I'll also say, you both know this, it's very easy to gain weight. So if you're already kind of in a larger body as a kid, you gain 10 pounds a year, it really adds on after time. So it was like very slow for me. I started off being chubby, and then I was just slow and kind of added on.
Yeah, I've seen this. There's a few people I've worked with in my career where a few, I mean thousands obviously,
Thousands.
but no, seriously, throughout the years, I mean they'll turn around, they're like, what happened? Like, it's been this 30 to 40-year climb. And I'm like, I get it. It's like, you start, eating less calories, you start fighting, and you start, and blood sugar's off, and then you start binging, and then you start feeling crappy about yourself. It really is amazing how much the mind affects all this, right? It's suddenly you eat poorly, you feel bad about yourself, your body feels inflamed, you're sitting on the couch a little bit more, and then you got to have some drive to be able to, get back on that horse and get
100%.
moving a little bit. But it's very like, people are like, well, how does someone, gain weight? Like, I think it's very easy to fall into that trap. I think this is a lifetime of, we think about bad habits that maybe any of us established throughout life, or tendencies we may all kind of lean towards. And why can't it be weight gain? It's just I think it's very obvious,
It's very easy. And also, Don, at baseline, if in America, if all of us don't make conscious choices every single day to be healthier, we are getting sicker. That's just the trajectory. We have one trajectory in this country. If we are not effortfully doing things every single day, we're going to end up with one sort of chronic illness or another, or carrying unwanted weight, which then may in turn into that. Not to mention, which I know we wanted to talk about, but the kind of mental and emotional component of all of this, which is that if we don't do, we're destined for depression and anxiety and all those things too, which
Yeah,
stinks.
and I mean, I was shocked. I can't remember where I was, Dawn, but I was talking to some people and they were looking at an app. And this was a number of people over the course of the day. I think it was at a convention. And they were, guess what they were checking? They're all checking their blood glucose levels, and they all were borderline or diabetic, or, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people that I came across today that have this issue. And obviously, maybe I take it for granted, but and it's not necessarily in my family, but certainly that seems to be a growing issue as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think the rates are that at least about 60% of people in this country have a diagnosed form of chronic illness. So you can
Wow.
imagine how many people
I didn't
are.
know that. I was off on that number. I was going to say it was 30% maybe. I didn't realize it was that high.
Yeah, 60%. So it's more than 1 in 2. It depends on who you're asking. It's always between 50 and 60% though, is that
Wow.
number. And it's getting higher and higher. The rates of childhood diabetes are getting younger and younger and younger too. It's just we're all putting in so much effort, specifically the three of us. We're all out here, right? We're all in it for the same reasons. And because I believe the machine of the big food and the machine of big pharma is a little bit stronger than us, it's almost like we're fighting a tidal wave sometimes. But I have more hope than ever that people can get help, by the way. So, and I believe that.
No, so I feel like nowadays, like we have access to so much better information, right? It
We
just,
do.
you can PubMed and you can find a couple of experts out there that really speak from a good place. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, yourself, my buddy, Dr. Dwayne Jackson. There are people out there that, can become this source that you really trust. So I feel like now there are so many different avenues for me to be able to explore where, I've turned 47 on Monday.
Happy
Maybe,
birthday.
thank you very much. Maybe 27 years ago when I got into the
Oh my God.
industry, it was way different, but we have all this access now. Are we becoming unhealthier as a society?
We are becoming unhealthier as a society. I think that these tools are amazing. And then also, they're not always accessible. And it's like, if I think of it like a bucket, right? The amount of unhealthy things in our physical environment, the amount of drugs that we take, the amount of, like pharmaceutical drugs that we take, the amount of just the actual food we have is so depleted in minerals and nutrients. The soil we have is depleted. So if those like foundations are really filling that bucket up so much, it's like you're going to have to work double as hard. So that's the problem. It's not that people are actually moving more, by the way. They're actually more conscious of their health than ever. It's just that the effort and the input you have to put in is more now,
Derek,
unfortunately.
you feel a difference, Derek. I don't know, because Derek and I were just over in Europe. So,
Oh,
I'm over in Austria, I'm over in Switzerland, and like streets are clean, you're breathing in the air, we're
oh my
outside. Like
gosh.
I'm on the ski mountain and they're serving me like green salads. Like the salad
Delicious.
just tastes fresh. It's wintertime. It's fresh. It tastes different. Like if we travel to a tropical climate and you're in an area that I call is like a bit unscathed, the fruit tastes better, right? Like things just you can taste food that's alive, right? And then I think even around here, you start eating, we're eating healthy, but the food isn't like it doesn't have that power.
It
Um,
doesn't. Yeah, I just completely agree with you. I want to hear about your experience too, Derek.
yeah,
But
yeah.
Don, I do. It's what you're experiencing is real. I have cousins. My first cousins are Austrian. When they come visit here, they are so ill and they are the healthiest eaters in the world. They're eating vegetables and meat. They're not eating grains. They're not eating anything. It's just every single part of our food system, unfortunately, is built for shelf life. It's built for profit. And it really is there's a huge difference in the foods in Europe. And now I got to be honest with you, in places like London and the UK, though, they're catching up to us in the disease statistics because a lot of it's become westernized and industrialized, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, like I was in Germany for 2 weeks, about the same time Dawn was away, and even just like the simple thing is like more people are walking and taking bikes, and just that part of it, not necessarily like a gym culture, but certainly an exercise culture and a mobility culture. Um, but the other thing was, like, I was on my phone the other day, and I was comparing with my wife our metrics from our smartwatch and going, okay, well, how many steps, how many calories does it calculate? What was your sleep? What, and we're having this conversation. I think, I'll have that conversation with Dawn, or like, Dawn, how many times a year do you get blood work done? And comparing that, and I think there's certain segments of us that do that, but then there's a whole other segment of the population that doesn't do that, or doesn't give a damn, or just does it for show, right? So I think you're either engaged, like we're there's like a disappearing middle class on so many levels. Either you're engaged or you're not, but there's no middle class, right?
I just absolutely agree with you, and I really feel confidently that you have to be a freak a little bit. You have to be a health freak in order to be healthy. The odds are stacked against you, like you said, and there's that disappearing middle. I love how you phrase that too, where it's either that people are so honestly tapped out of trying things because they're not getting the results that they just say, I'm abandoning this and I'm just, throw your hands up, exactly, screw it, right? We all use the word screw it in our careers. I know we do, like with clients, right? It's like the screw it mentality. Or there's people just like constantly who have to be in it. And Don, you made a really good point before too, that people also, like, if you're trying really hard and not getting results, because now people might be doing like fancy functional medicine tests, but they're not applying it in a way that helps them. And I put the blame on the practitioners for that. They're spending more money and getting less results because they're not focusing on the foundations of like being a human. Like, you have to get sunlight. You got to walk, right? Like, you have to be a human being. And I know and I know, Don, this is the work you do. And I would bet, Derek, it's the work you do with clients too. But Don, you actually make sure people are humans in your practice. Like, they're not just coming for that 20-minute workout. They're in with you
No,
for
no,
life.
no, and that's why I'm really, and thank you, but like I struggle, which is ironic because I become known for the person who gets these people ready for the big screen. There's normally like a start and finish, which
Right.
I've always hated because I'm in this for a long-term investment. I'm like, I don't like quick fixes. I don't like, someone asked me the other day about juicing, and I'm like, well, why are you doing it? And they're like, well, I feel like it's a good kickstart for me, and I really want to do this before I begin on this journey. And I'm like, all right, in that case, I'm okay, but don't rely on this. That's the problem I'm having with a lot of the hormone replacement therapy nowadays, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
believe, and I had a really in-depth conversation with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon last week when I was in Houston with her, but we talked about it a bit. And I said, it's frustrating for me when I hear that people aren't, you know, putting in the time and doing the little things that are going to pay dividends. They just immediately want to go to this quick fix. And then my next question is, if you get on that as a 30 or 35-year-old, how is it going to be when you're 45, 50? How's your body going to respond to that? And then that's frustrating. And then I get even more pissed off at actors because they're on there, talking about getting on stuff now. Everyone's being
Mm-hmm.
open and honest. And then that 18-year-old's hearing about that. And then they're considering getting on at 18, 19, 20. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you haven't put in those reps yet. Like, you're trying to play in the US Open for golf. You've swung a club 5 times. Like, you're not even close to being where you need to be. People do not want to spend time doing those boring things. They want to resort to cold plunges and saunas, which I like, but those are not hard things to do.
No.
Those are not the hard thing to do is waking up every day, Michelle, and doing the things that you preach.
Exactly. You're 100% right. It is like a drop in the bucket to do those things. And honestly, I love cold plunging and sauna. I use them regularly too.
Sure.
They're nothing on a body that's stressed and inflamed. It's like, you have to think about the body as being the environment with which those things are going into. If they're going into a stressed and inflamed environment, by the way, they're going to be stressful and inflammatory. It's like same thing with hormone replacement therapy. If your liver and your digestion are working properly, you're not going to absorb those hormones appropriately. So it's like,
Right.
you have to get your foundations locked in: your blood sugar, your digestion, your muscle, your movement, your nutrition. And like you said, it's not only that people don't like want to do the hard thing, it's that they truly are starting to believe the hard thing doesn't do anything. They actually think the quick fixes are more effective. And it's like, they literally are not.
But
There
but
is no
but but
replacement.
but people are, they also don't know how to quantify success, right? Like, for
No.
years it was the scale. And I'm not going to lie, for certain people, the scale is a very
Yeah,
valuable
it's
tool, right? But
validating. Yeah.
but what about the woman who gained 8 pounds of muscle last year and lost 8 pounds of fat. I mean, technically the scale's not going to tell her anything, right? Like that's a pretty big swing in my opinion. Like you're putting on that much body armor and you're developing that resilience and she's moving better and she's feeling healthier. Well, if she jumped on the scale, that's not really going to quantify the work she put in. How difficult is that to lose 8 pounds of fat, put on 8 pounds of muscle? So I think we need to do a better job. I'm not talking about Derek or you or I, but like as a society, we have to do a better job at establishing these like non-scale victories and teaching
I love
people
that.
what to pay attention to.
I completely agree. And I will say that's why coaches, any type of coach is so helpful. Like I have clients who come to me with severe anxiety and severe gut issues. Those are two of the conditions I work with. And so someone will come to me and will literally be vomiting like 20 times a day, running to the bathroom 20 times a day. And then 3 months in, I'll say to them like, hey, you haven't mentioned your digestion in like a month. What's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. I'm like, you forgot that was
Okay,
like, yeah,
you won
exactly.
lotto. Thanks for
Yeah, exactly.
telling
Like
me.
you forgot. That's how you know you're healing, when you forget to care about something, right? That's how you know. Like if it's something like, again, if one of your clients, like the one you were mentioning, if the scale doesn't move much, but her mobility is different and she can like lift her kids or her grandkids up without thinking about it, but we don't realize the things that we're not suffering from anymore. We forget that we were suffering in the first place, which is a good thing. I'm glad we have short-term memory on pain and suffering in some ways.
Okay.
Michelle, have you dealt with any people who have tried taking some of these new drugs like Ozempic
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how it's impacted them? Um, I'm curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have a pretty clear stance on these drugs, which is that they are a tool. So for some people, they're a tool in the toolbox. They're not foundational. But I will tell you that because, again, some people have metabolic syndrome, they have true blue weight loss resistance. They could eat the same calories in, calories out, workout. They are not going to get the same results as someone else who does. Not saying they won't lose weight, obviously. Eventually, they would lose some weight, but it's going to be a much greater battle. And if these drugs help with some of those things, great. But I will tell you, Derek, that I work with very like compromised clients from an immune perspective, a gut perspective. And in some people, it causes immediate and long-term illness. And the symptoms are so severe outside of even the gut symptoms, like depression, anxiety, inflammation, like there's a pretty specific group of people I don't love that use them. And then for most people, they can be helpful. But you have to view it as a tool in the toolbox. There is no replacement for those foundations.
Love it. Can you talk anxiety right now? Because I never really, I'll be honest, I never understood it.
I love that.
No, I never understood until you go through it, right? Until you go through it. I was on a medication a year and a half ago and it affected me in a way that I never got affected. And there was probably a 2 or 3 day span where I could not go to sleep. I mean, I thought I was going to die. And I had I'm sorry to admit, I had a
Oh,
newfound respect for it, because you hear anxiety and you're like, all right, well, at what level is that? Like, are you nervous? Or every time you lay down, are you like, almost, like literally? So,
mm,
I think after going through that for a few days and found out what it was, and I had a newfound respect for it. But why is this something that, explain it a bit?
I will.
It just happens to people. Like, what is the whole process of how someone, with me, I felt like it was simple. There was a medication I took and it just triggered something. It wasn't that in my brain. It triggered something in my brain. How does this how does this happen to people who aren't on medication and they've been dealing with this their entire life?
First of all, thank you for sharing that, Dawn. And I'm sorry to hear you had that experience. And I'm glad you're feeling better now. I'm so
I'm
glad.
glad. I got to be honest. I'm very happy I went through it. I
Yeah,
really am, because
100%.
now I feel like I have this new. Not saying I didn't respect it, but I think when you go through
But
something
you
for a
have to
short
get
period of
it.
time, you have
You
to
get
get.
it.
Now, when people talk
Yeah.
about it, it's not like, oh, go outside and walk barefooted and take a deep breath and walk around and earthing and connect with the energy and go meditate and you're going to be better. Like, no, it's not like when you're going to bed at night
No.
and you're like, I am afraid to go to bed for the first time in my life. I am nervous about it. It's a scary feeling.
100%. Yeah. So my experience with anxiety was panic attacks, which I think is like anxiety level 10. So I'm definitely one of those like empathetic, highly sensitive people who I'm feeling other people's emotions. I'm feeling my own all the time. I'm checking the temperature of everywhere I'm at. When I lost weight is actually when my anxiety became really bad. So this is a weird thing, but I think something people don't realize is that weight loss is not what your body necessarily wants to do, especially in a rapid period of time, right? Because your body's thinking, we're starving to death. What's going on? It doesn't like sudden changes like that over time. So my blood sugar was actually very low, which creates kind of like an alarm in your body. Like, oh my God, you have to get us carbs. That alarm is there to get sugar from inside of our body. And so it's this interesting process that happens biologically where we can make sugar in times of stress from other non-sugar things. It's called gluconeogenesis. So low blood sugar is a huge trigger for anxiety. The experience of anxiety, Don, can be just like yours, where it's a feeling of insomnia. It can be racing thoughts, or it can be these very physical symptoms of just like feeling off, feeling fear, obviously, is a big piece of anxiety. And then panic attacks can feel a lot like your body telling you you're going to die. I mean, it could be that severe. It's really like you are going to die is the kind of feeling that people have. And we don't have the tools to grapple with that, obviously, because your body wants you to be scared, but you don't want to be scared. So it's this kind of internal battle that happens. But anxiety can be anything from like a racing heart, like that nausea feeling, that butterflies in your stomach feeling, all the way through to panic attacks, which can go through almost like an out of body experience, to be honest with you.
I had a panic attack.
I think you were having panic attacks, by the way. Not that I'm diagnosing. I think you were having panic attacks.
That's what it felt like. You can't breathe. It's just very weird. I was never one to have that. I also felt like, maybe history can trigger those things, right?
Definitely.
Because I'm actually remembering. I remembered this recently. My first one was after a friend died years ago. And I remember I got into an MRI, I got into an MRI chamber and never like I could lay in those and be like that, like no problem. And I remember getting in one freaking out of it. So like it's amazing how these triggers in your brain can just set you off anytime you get into this situation or this environment. What do you do to help people? I mean, I'm sure obviously it's probably 100 different answers to this question, but can you go through some basics for people who are listening? Maybe they want to think about.
100%. Yeah. The other thing I want us to think about around anxiety and panic is that, like you're experienced on, we have like a stress bucket, basically, and we can only handle as much stress as in that bucket. And when it goes over that bucket, the alarm signals are going off. So your friend passing, that could be like a 90% bucket fill. And then that silly little MRI machine was like 10% over.
Another 90%.
Exactly. And you're 110%. Exactly. Yes. So it's what's really interesting. And this is like too big of a conversation, but I'm just going to briefly say this is that the COVID virus was for many people, and the vaccines themselves was like a 90%er for a lot of people. So what I've seen from long COVID is actually debilitating panic attacks in people who otherwise had no anxiety history. This is new. I've been working with anxiety for 10 years. It's actually this like histamine thing. It's this whole scientific nerdy thing, but this has been happening in the past few years. I work with the same clients, much like you, Don. I've had some of the same clients for 6 years weekly. These are my people. Like we are showing up in whatever way, lifestyle wise, we need to. Never said anything about anxiety. Immediately after getting the virus, started having anxiety. So there's something at play here, and I'm seeing new onset anxiety a lot. What I would do with clients is target anxiety from a bucket perspective. I want to know the stress of the body that's happening, inflammation, blood sugar issues, gut issues, and then of course, if there's mental support that's needed. Mindset and strategy wise, when it comes to anxiety, I really have clients learning about the kind of like different voices in their head. By the time you're having a panic attack, there's been a lot of trying to get your attention on something and a lot of us trying to shut it down. The best possible thing we can do with anxiety is actually listen to it, accept it, and acknowledge it as it's happening. So if I have a kind of gut punch anxiety episode now, I'll breathe and say, oh, I'm familiar with this. I hate this. I know what this is. And I'm going to wait for it to pass, because any panic attack can't really last more than like 20 minutes. It's the fear of having another panic attack that then prompts us to be scared of sleeping, prompts us to be scared of doing the things we were doing, because our nervous system learns by example. So it learned, oh my God, Don went to sleep yesterday and he was anxious, sleep bad. So I don't want to do sleep again because that thing's going to happen. And I hated that thing. If we ride the wave of anxiety, it's so much better than trying to fight it or shut it down, because our body gets scared when we try to shut it down. So the more you say go away, the more anxiety says I'm here, because it wants your attention. So like a little kid, we give anxiety our attention and we say, hey, How are you doing? Hate that you're here, but I know that you're here. What can I do to help you? Once that acute episode ends, I have people re-engage. I do this work with clients. And then also there's amazing supplements I can use to just bring down the kind of physical edge of anxiety too, while we're working on kind of the mindset around it.
Thank you for that.
Hmm.
Derek?
Yeah, I noticed, and part of it is the aging process, but I had some similar things to Don, and I noticed that I had a sensitivity to caffeine as well, where
Mm.
I had to stop. Like I only drink decaf coffee now because of it, because I'm just like, okay, that's something that was very noticeable.
Absolutely. Yeah. So coffee being a stimulant in and of itself is something that obviously when we have physical symptoms that mimic anxiety, like our heart pounding, right? Like if you were nervous about something and your heart would be pounding. So since coffee creates that sensation, it's a stimulant. It will increase your blood pressure and your heart rate. For some people, feeling that then creates a brain thing where you're like, what is that? Why is my heart pounding? And back and forth. Also, anything stimulating can kind of activate your sympathetic nervous system, which can make you feel more up and up. This is one of the first things I address with clients when we're doing kind of the food end of the anxiety piece is, are you drinking too much coffee? Are you doing those things? And for you, Derek, like coffee was fine your whole life until it just wasn't. And that's what I really want to find out with my clients is like, what's okay right now and what's not. Same with like a cold plunge or something, whereby if their bucket's not 90% full, a cold plunge feels great. Then sometimes they do it. And I see clients with like huge anxiety after because it's stress on the body still. It's a good stress, but too much stress is too much stress, even if it's good.
A couple of clients, friends, recently, over the last few years, they were, I'll call it supplementing in microdosages of cannabis. And I understand you probably don't have an answer to this because it's so, the research is so thin, I think, but they actually were going through anxiety or panic attacks. And their first response was to take more cannabis because they thought it was relaxing them. They actually, a few of them got off of it and found that their anxiety completely went away. Any type of panic attack they had completely went away, which is contradictory to why a lot of people take it in the first place. They're taking
100%.
it and they're lining it up with their Oura ring readings, and they're seeing that their resting heart rate's dropping, and they're seeing
Mm-hmm.
that maybe they're getting a little bit better quality sleep and they're falling asleep easier. But there's too many people that I know who are on it that were having these issues that got off of it and no longer have it. Have you seen anything like this?
Oh yeah, major. My first panic attack was when I was smoking weed in a basement in Long Island, actually, by the way. And
Nice.
I will never forget because I was like 16 years old and I looked at this dude who I hardly knew and he was like, "You're having a panic attack." And I was like, "What?" Because I was like so unwell. A lot of people's first time panic attacks are actually under the influence of weed specifically. I think microdosing might be different, but I can think of why maybe. The reason why for most people is because you want to get back into control of your brain and you can't, and then that's very scary. And so your body, that disconnect is very scary when you're actually high. And I stopped smoking then too because I was like, this is not the life for me. I don't want any more panic attacks. When it comes to micro dosing, I think also if people's heart rate, it's funny, Don, if people's heart rate's too low, that also can cause anxiety, by the way, because you're not getting juicy blood flow to your brain. You're not feeling energized. And that low heart rate is actually a potential cause of anxiety too. So for them, especially if they're athletes like your people, they might have actually gone a little too low in that, and then not getting that juicy blood flow could
Never
be.
thought of it that way. I never thought about the heart rate piece of it, but it's very interesting. Derek?
Um, I think we get into this sort of pattern of people using catchphrases and terms very loosely. And
Yeah.
when you hear people talk about microbiome, it almost seems like a bit of a catch-all, like, oh, it must be your microbiome, right? And even when I was at one of the conferences in New York, somebody had a supplement that was like a um, um, what do you call it? I can't remember offhand what the term is, but you take a supplement and it'll correct your microbiome and
Like a
uh,
probiotic kind of
yeah,
thing. Like that.
probiotic
Yeah, yeah,
type
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
supplement, right? And what are your thoughts on that? And is it as easy to adjust it as we think it is, or is it just about eating well?
That's such a good question. And I laughed when he said, is it easy to adjust it? We have like hundreds of trillions of bacteria. Like they are not responsive to us taking a little probiotic pill. That's been like a little laughable in recent years because I
Yeah,
used to also be like, "Oh yeah, we'll take this little pill and it'll change
it's
everything."
gonna
Well,
fix everything. Yeah, yeah.
you know, Gabrielle's really close friend, Dr. Alexis Jasmine, just came and we had this whole talk about this too. And she was saying basically that actually what recovers people's gut microbiome and these bacteria that are responsible for our digestion, absorption, our interactions with other people. We now estimate that our gut microbiome extends outside of our body. There's like a cloud, essentially, is how impactful it is that your gut microbiome can influence someone else's because it's communicating with it. That's how highly scientific it is and how silly and funny we are. We think we could take a probiotic and alter this thing. What profoundly does seem to alter our gut bacteria is eating enough fiber, eating enough prebiotics, and which is like food basically for our, you know, that prebiotic fiber food for our gut, which would also be really helpful to eat soluble fibers, getting sunlight appropriately, being in nature, like things that, you know, if you put your feet in the ground, you're getting a lot more bacteria from the ground than you would even by taking a pill or something like that. So eating a robust and diverse diet and being a human, as we were saying, and just getting that sunlight, accessing that circadian rhythm and being with like other people who you love. It's so silly, but that connection piece seems to alter our gut microbiome more than these fancy supplements and things like that, which is not that surprising, but it's funny that we thought we were so smart, us functional people. We've been like
No,
pushing those.
I think it's refreshing to hear you say that, right? Because it's the truth, and it's yeah, the thought that one little pill is suddenly going to fix something, so extreme. So I'm going to bring up a topic right now. You're going to roll your
Please
eyes to it, but we have to talk about it
hit
because I
me.
think people are just missing the eight ball on this alcohol, right? Like it's
Mhm.
well, people are getting into, and they always try and justify it, right? When my doctor says I can have this, or I only drink wine, or I only drink clear, and Dr. G and I have our opinion on it, and I would love to get
Yep.
your opinion on it. But how alcohol affects the microbiome, I am not at all worried about the calories from alcohol. Right? It's not one of my. But what are the other things that it does? Can you explain to people because they need to hear this from you, not only me.
100%. Yeah. So there's really no safe limit for alcohol, in my opinion. I'm pretty flexible with clients and their lifestyles when it comes to that, but I'm aware that it's hugely taxing on your liver. And then anything that also is going to be challenging to your liver is going to be challenging to the rest of digestion. It's tremendously inflammatory to the rest of your body. Inflammation is a communication system. So your microbiome is going to be communicating with the other parts of your body. And inflammation is kind of this like downstream effect. Alcohol is like pouring fuel on a fire, in my opinion. So, and it really can, there's so many studies that show it can alter that gut microbiome and then also have many other downstream effects. I'll also tell you that, again, with people who are experiencing anxiety, caffeine and alcohol are two of the first places that I look because alcohol does a couple things that concern me. It'll affect the body's ability to handle stress because it will dampen the capacity of your parasympathetic nervous system. And then your nervous system, by the way, also the nerves of your brain and your gut communicate to each other, and that'll change your gut bacteria too, which is pretty amazing. Alcohol also is very generally high in histamines. And histamines are, like I said before, one of these anxiety things that's been coming up a lot. So I've seen people tolerate alcohol less and less as time goes on. It's definitely if people are noticing they're having low blood sugar episodes, sleeplessness, they might not be getting away with alcohol so much or as much as they think.
It's amazing how bad you feel. I'm not a drinker, but every
Same.
year
Yeah.
I go to Europe a few times a year, and I really enjoy beer, but I won't really drink beer here, but I'll drink it over in Europe. Casually we'll have a beer here and there. When I was over in Europe a few weeks ago, just by having a couple of day, probably a couple of beers a day, I got home and I was legitimately between the jet lag, the dehydration, just looking at my body recover. It took me, I
Yeah.
want to say, a week and a half between all of that to get back to this level of like, all right, I'm
I'm a
normal
person.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
but like when you're that in tune with your body, you can see how it affects you. There's ways to measure. There's trackers and there's things that you see,
Yeah.
whether they're 100% accurate or not. You're following these trends.
The
When you're
trends, the
resilient,
patterns, what matters, right? Pattern recognition is
exactly.
all that matters. Exactly. Yeah.
My resilience on this, and that new
Yeah.
category of
I have it
resilience,
too. Mhm.
right? You saw this week span I was away, and you just saw it do this. And then the first week I was back, it was doing this. And then suddenly you start seeing a climb. My HRV was in the tank. I'm like,
Exactly.
holy, like my HRV got cut down by a third. And you're fighting it. You're like, all right, I'm tired. All right, I feel it. But that will allows you to push.
Exactly.
Anytime you expose yourself to this at different times in your life, it changes your
Mm-hmm.
thinking and whether you want to ever do that again, right?
Exactly. And you're not even a drinker again. So you're not getting like the huge benefit, like people who love to drink, and they're getting these huge like dopamine benefits. For you, you just really don't feel good after. Like it's fun to drink beer for a second, but you're like, I'm good because you're not even getting that boost from it that something else could easily give you. Alcohol is a poison, right? We acknowledge that. The body has to metabolize it. It's incredibly challenging to metabolize. I know that there's always these studies that there's resveratrol in the wine and that, look at these. I think that people in
Take
other countries
resveratrol.
just take resveratrol. Exactly. Dr. G will hook you up. Okay. We'll get you very high dose resveratrol. You don't even have to take the supplement. We'll get you medication level resveratrol.
Oh my
Listen,
God.
I think that the thought is, oh, people in Europe are so healthy because they drink. It's not because they drink. It's in spite of the stuff that's going on in America. That's why they're healthy. It's not because of the alcohol. Maybe they can tolerate that. Again, thinking about our health bucket, maybe their health can tolerate it more because they're healthier. I do not think that's the reason that they are healthy by any means.
Dave?
It's like a friend of mine who's he was sort of a on and off again smoker, and he's telling me like, "Wow, smoking calms me down." I'm like, "No, you're in withdrawal.
Exactly.
You're
It
an
calms you
addict."
down from not having it.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
so I
that's
think that
That's so
happens a
true.
lot too,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely. My
I
dad has a comment about weed, and he says, no one has ever been a better or smarter or kinder person from smoking weed. And I'm like,
very funny.
that's the truth. Yeah. He always said that. Sorry, Don. Yeah.
There was a no, it's fine. There was a book I read years ago called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price. And it was I probably read this book um in my early 20s. It was when I really started getting into understanding about organic farming and the different soils and the tractor on the on the soil opposed to the horses. You know,
So cool.
yeah. What the hell is it? It's not a hoof. What is it?
Yeah.
We're
No, I
gonna
think
run.
it's hubs.
It's a hoof, right?
I think it's a
It's
hub.
like yeah, and how it would denature the soil. And they started showing people in different regions who were never exposed to chemicals or toxins or low levels of stress. And they went through their jawline. I mean, even after they passed away, and they showed their teeth. And you started saying to yourself, oh my God. And then, obviously the people who were living would come over to the States and spend a few weeks. And I think you had chimed in on this earlier about your friends who are Europeans.
Yeah.
Talk to us about, what is it? They do drink over there, right? But there are different types of access to food qualities that they have that maybe we
Yep.
don't have. There's portion control. There is, do we live to work and do they work to live? Like,
Yeah.
talk to us about why, why is it that we do see a difference? And over there, I didn't see any obese people, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a combination of I feel like the way that we view the body in addition to literally our environment. So there's the way that we view the body is something that is broken that needs to be fixed. Versus I think in many other countries we view the body as being this whole amazing thing, and then if something happens, we can kind of support it back to balance. We have very poor nutrient supply in our literal, even those organic foods. The nutrient quality, the mineral quantity is so different compared to European countries. We also, one of the biggest speculations is that we spray with glyphosate, the Roundup, is a huge potential consideration here on a lot of our crops. And I also think that people in Europe are much more community centric. And I think that is such a big deal that they are with people, they are enjoying meals together. We eat our meals alone, we eat our meals at our desk. We do not live together in any sort of communal way. Even in big cities like Manhattan, I think they're even more isolating than living in a rural place, which used to be like we were all crammed together in cities, so we would all see each other. But I think with the advent of like technology combined with the fact that we have these ideals of working, like you said, constantly and not having that family community time, I think is such a huge part of it.
That's something that I did see. You have a good point there. I remember going to a few restaurants where they had large tables. Everyone was sitting there. They were conversing with each other. There was no phones on the tables. No one was checking. No one was sitting there. It's like they were in this moment of enjoyment and
Presence.
happiness and presence. And it was, now that you mentioned that, that was probably one of, later on, one of my bigger takeaways of what was the difference. It's a different atmosphere when you go into a restaurant here opposed to over there. It just seemed more like that community. I'm
It
glad you
is.
said that.
There's also, it's really funny. They did this study, I think it was like 20 years ago, but there was this YouTube video I was obsessed with where they had French students, they put a plant into like French classrooms, and they would have students in a college level class eating in class. And the other kids were like so shocked. Everyone in the class was like, are you eating in class? Like, why would you do that? Because food is this experience in Europe. You sit and you enjoy food. You would never just eat in the middle of the day all day. It's not something that you would be doing where you're just like nibbling on stuff. Like, you sit down and you have a meal. So they were so shocked. And I'm sure it must be a little different now as all of these countries are catching up to our bad behaviors. But in that video, I was so shocked that they were like, in elementary school, you can always eat in class in America. And it's very commonplace to do that. And certainly in college, that was like the only time I did eat because we were like too busy having fun the rest of the time.
Dave?
You guys find like, I have on my social media feeds, like say on Instagram, stuff comes up about local restaurants, and it's almost like I'm not gonna I hate to say the word food porn, but it comes up and you're just like, oh geez, I'm really missing out. I should go to that restaurant. And they really objectify it in a way that makes you feel like you're missing out. Do you find that that's an issue now too? Like stuff pops up, I'm like, oh, I guess I have to go to that place now.
Oh yeah, and you're hitting on like the edge of an iceberg here. The iceberg and the glacier underneath is that this is the only country where food marketing is allowed in this level. We are marketing food to children. Like, think about, there's celebrities on cereal boxes to make children buy it. Can we think of the sickness in that? Like how, and it's poisonous foods for children, and we're selling it directly to them. There's ads on television targeting specifically marginalized low-income populations of children. And then we're kind of flipping it in this way to make it like these foods that are unhealthy are more accessible or something. And then, of course, there's food marketing to adults who are healthy like you. And that, if it can even get you, can you imagine how much it can get a kid who's watching TV and being told that they're going to be happy and healthy because of this? The guerrilla marketing of food companies would shock us all to our core if we knew their dirty secrets. And there's some ways we're starting to air it, but it's the same big tobacco guys. I mean, literally the same people. It's not like they're any different. And they are so wicked, and it is so effective, their strategies, that it has created this. If you were in Europe, Don or Derek, did you see, like Michael Jordan on a Fruit Loops box? No, they don't have any. There's no food marketing. That's not, you have one brand of food and it's food. It's not like Apple's buy, the NBA. It's like, I don't know why I'm doing so many basketball references, but it's just literally apples, right? Like, you're not being sold, you're being sold to in this country. That's the bottom of it all, is that this is a country that corporations and the government benefit each other. And this is the result of all of that, basically.
I got one more question, because you've been so gracious with your time. And honestly, Michelle, we could stay on with you for hours. You're just a very easy person to talk to. So what should we feel encouraged about? I mean, we obviously went through, things that need to be fixed, just a few of them, or things that I think all agree on. But is there anything out there right now that's making you feel good about where the industry is going, or how we are progressing, to end on a good note?
I have never been more hopeful than now. And I know it was doom and gloom. I'm telling you, I have never been, exactly. But it's not even my usual style, but I've been particularly pissed about the food stuff recently. So I'm venting on your guys' podcast, but
love it.
I feel like I'm seeing so many practitioners coming back around to those basics, Don, where they are like, you know what? The freaking functional medicine test, the fancy test, they didn't do anything. We have to get back to, I was wrong. Yeah, a lot of them are coming back around. Or that, you know what? I get 10 DMs a day from dietitians who say, our education wasn't enough. Are you actually helping people? Because I'm not getting results with people. What can I do? People are asking the right questions. And I will tell you, I've seen people throughout my career have, as much as I've seen new anxiety, I've seen people with severe panic attacks of 20 years heal. The information we have now, like you said, I really feel like we got it. If we can just stay laser focused on it. I have seen so many cases of miraculous healing that are not so miraculous, because if you do that foundational work, you will get there. And there is not, I will tell you just in total transparency, my aunt has glioblastoma brain cancer, which is the diagnosis you don't want. She got diagnosed 3 years ago. I think today, actually. It's either today or tomorrow. The doctor told her you'll be dead in 3 months. It's been 3 years, and it's really due to like hardcore nutrigenomics, like really intense, of course, the advent of new medications that helped her as well. But you could give me or someone in my family a brain cancer diagnosis, stage 4, and I'm still going to believe there's hope. Like as long as we are breathing, we have hope on here. And I fully believe that.
I believe that also. My uncle, unfortunately, was diagnosed with God, it was 5 years ago. He had terminal cancer, and he's still here. So, they are going to get it wrong, and they are. I mean, do we really know how someone's going to respond? And I think, we haven't talked about this at all, and I'm going to use some language on here, but
Please.
He almost took this "fuck you" approach to it, right? And he almost like he got it. He was diagnosed with it, and he kind of looked at me and was like, "Fuck this thing," right? And I was just kind of like, "Whoa!" Like,
I love that.
Like, but like he came into a meeting with me recently, and I got to tell the story because it's inspiring. But comes into a meeting, it's a bunch of us sitting there, and he's got a suit on. He's on crutches coming in because they wanted to amputate his leg, and then he ended up having surgery, and they didn't have to. So like the guy's been through the ringer, but he comes out, I go, "How you doing, buddy?" He goes, "Good, Donnie." He's like, "Yeah, just came from the doctor." I said, "How'd it go?" And everyone's like sitting around listening, wanting to hear something inspiring. He goes, they found 2 tumors on my spine. And I'm just looking at everyone, and everyone's like, they don't know what to say. But I'm like, I'm almost looking at him like something's coming out of his mouth right now. Like I'm waiting for it. I'm like, come on. He goes, it's an interesting process, guys. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they're going to go in and they're going to tattoo. They got to tattoo these areas of my spine where they have to inject it with chemotherapy. He goes, and the doctor said he's going to do 2 tattoos. And I looked at the doctor and I said, "Well, do me a favor. Can you tattoo fuck and you on these God. 2 spots?" And we just like, I started laughing, and everyone was like, "Oh my God."
I love
and he's
that.
like sitting there laughing at me. And I'm looking at him and shaking my head because I'm like, this guy's a machine. But I am convinced that a part of his success, part of it, it's his headspace.
Oh, I think it's like a lot his head. And I believe in medicine, and I love him for that.
So do I.
And I will tell you, it's funny because there's like kind of a Gen Z versus Gen X versus millennial thing. And I joke because like you and Gabrielle are very hustle culture, like get it done type people, but it's like kind of making a comeback because people are like, "Oh shit, you kind of have to do it."
You gotta work hard.
Like it's kind of exactly. It's like they kind of were right, and you kind of have to do it. And I'm like, I'm loving it coming back around where people are like, "Okay, we tried the other way of like it's going to be easy and we can make it easy and poor us." And everyone's like, "Well, that sucked." And now I'm coming back to the Don and Gabrielle situation. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Michelle, do us a favor. This was a great conversation. I got to get you in my challenge community to meet my challengers. They would absolutely love you.
I'd love to meet you.
Thank you. Could you let us know where everyone can find you? And if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing so?
Absolutely. So my Instagram is really easy, Michelle Shapiro RD. I have an anxiety program called Anxiety Proof. I have a team of it's us 5 total. So there's 4 staff nutritionists, dietitians that you can work with one-on-one if you need any support like that. We work with anxiety, gut issues, losing weight in a non-harmful way. And I have a new program coming out for people with really complex immunity stuff. So I'll pass that information along to you too, Don.
Would absolutely love it. And remember, like you could be the smartest person. Does that interest us? You got to be a great person to be on D&D Fitness Radio. Derek and I love just great, cool people that we could just sit here and rap with. It's a casual conversation. There's no fancy intro. We're just, Derek's in his tank top. I got a backwards hat on. We want to relax and fun. You were a great person to have on. We're really grateful. Been great getting to know you, and I'd love you to take a trip out here like we talked about last time.
I absolutely promise. Derek, I'm so happy I got to meet you. The honor was mine. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Derek, I'll talk to you later.
Good one.